I'm Pepe and welcome to Tau Coding. In this video series, we are going to talk about Flask, Dash, and other libraries that will help us with the web development in Python. Let's get started. So, let's get started with today's video. Here we are already inside the folder for the repository. VLS, we see that we don't really have much, right? So we have the README, some hidden junk, but apart of that, that's it. So the package manager that I want to use for this project is pipenv. If we want to use pipenv, we need to install it first, and we do that with pipenv install. Pipenv install will create a couple of files in our folder. They are pipfile and pipfile.log. They'll basically contain some information about the libraries that we are going to use in this project. And which are the libraries that we are going to use? So of course we are going to need Flask, but there are a couple of others that we are going to use. For example, Flask WTF for forms, Flask Bootstrap, and Flask and email validator as well. So let's install them. We can do that with pipenv install, and then the name of the library is separated by spaces. So Flask dash WTF. WTF or WT forms is a library for Python for generating forms, and Flask WTF is the bridge library between Flask and WT forms. So we'll also need Flask Bootstrap, and finally we'll need email validator. Email validator will need it because there will be some fields in our forms that are emails, and in order for Flask WTF to validate them, we need to add this email validator library. So we hit enter and it will start installing things. So let me see, what do we have now? It's logging now. Cool. So if we go to our text editor and open pipfile now, we see that all these libraries are already there, right? Cool. So now that we have our dependencies in place, let's create our first application, our Flask application. Let's call it app.py, for example. So in this app.py, we want to use, okay, so don't show this page again. That's better. So let's import from Flask. Let's import the Flask class. Let's now create our app. And this is the name. And let's if name equals main, let's run our application. That's cool. And yeah, please install Black. Something very cool about pipenv is that it will install things inside our pipenv virtual environment. So that's great. Cool. So now that we have the app.py there already, let me ls. So we have app.py here. If we try to do something like python app.py, we would be running Python with the environments or with the currently configured global Python version, right? Which in my case is -- version. It should be the one that ships with Mac. There you go. It's Python 2.7, something a bit old. So we want to use pipfiles Python in order to hook or to go inside the pipfile shell. We need to do pipenv shell. Pipenv shell, not pipfile shell, sorry. So now we can do something like Flask run. When we do so, we see that our application runs already. Right now it doesn't have a lot. Here we have not found error, but that's cool. We know how to jump into ppm shell and run our application. That's awesome. Now let's start to add a bit of layout to our application. What we can do in order to do that is to create some templates, right? So let's first create a Flask root. So add app.root, root, then if, there you go. Let's say that on the root. We want to create an index. And this one, we want to render the template, return render template, and it imports automatically. I want to import not that one, but that one instead. So let me see. Okay. So I want to import to render the template index.html. Cool. If I try to execute that now, right? If I try to execute that now, it says template not found index.html. That's because indeed the template file index.html do not exist. First, we need to create the templates folder, and then inside it, we can create our new file index.html. Cool. So now we would be able to create a simple default layout for HTML and say, I don't know, something like h1, or let's create using emmet. Hello world. That's cool. So if I reload, we get the hello world. That's cool and all, but we have installed Flask Bootstrap for a reason. Flask Bootstrap is this library that makes it easier to integrate the Bootstrap UI framework with Flask. So that means that in a couple of steps, we can make our Flask application aware of Bootstrap so that it's much easier for us to create UIs that depend on Bootstrap. So we should start by importing the relevant things. So from Flask Bootstrap, import Bootstrap, and then we need to bootstrap our application. We can do that directly by calling bootstrap on our app. That's cool. Now, if we reload our page, nothing should change, but something awesome is that we can ditch our whole HTML and make it extend one of the templates that are provided by Flask Bootstrap, right? So it provides several of them. We can start with the base one. So we can say that this extends bootstrap /base.html. Flask Bootstrap templates provide a lot of different blocks. One of them, for example, is the title, right? So we can say that the block title, we want to make it something like end block. Okay, we want to make it something like introduction to Flask Bootstrap. So if I reload my page now, the h1 should disappear, but it should have a title. So if I reload, there you go. We see, well, maybe it's a bit small for you, but we see here that we have introduction to Flask Bootstrap. Let's add some content. So luckily, Flask Bootstrap templates also provide a content block. So block content. Let me close that one. Block. Cool. So inside that one, I can create some h1, for example, and say hello world, as we were doing before. Cool. So there we go. We have here our hello world, our h1, and you can notice already that the font is different, right? So we have here a sans serif instead of the default font that we had before from the browser. So Bootstrap styles are being applied already. Let me inspect the element to show that out. Cool. So yeah, here we can see that it's importing Twitter Bootstrap. Well, it's importing an older version as of the time of recording this, but yeah, it's cool nevertheless. So now that we have some templating in place, let's start creating some forms, right? So for the two forms that we'll start creating are the register form and the login form. So as most applications, these will need some registration and some way of doing logging for users. For creating forms, we are not going to use just direct forms from HTML, but we're going to use this Flask WTF library, right? So from Flask WTF, we want to import Flask form. There you go. Flask form is a base class, so we'll need to extend it from a child class. So in our case, we are going to create a couple of forms. First, class login form, and this will extend Flask form, and it will have a couple of different fields. The fields that this will need will come from the WTF library directly. So from WT forms, we want to forms in plural. We want to import string field. We want to import password field, and I think that's it for now. Cool. And also we'll need some validators. That's true. So from WT forms dot validators, we want to import length, and we want to import email, and that's it for now, I believe. Cool. So the login form will have a couple of fields, right? So first we'll have an email field, right? This email field is going to be a string field, right? The string fields in the end are translated to inputs of type text. So the string field will have the name email, and as validators, this receives a list. So we'll add that this needs to be validated as an email. And as default length, I think we don't really need it because, yeah, the email will already validate that that's valid. And the email for the login form will also require a password. So password will be a password field with the name password. And I don't know, for default length, we'll add, or for minimal length, sorry, we'll add a validator. That length, we have a minimum of, what, 5 characters, for example. That's cool. And then we'll require a login form as well. The login form, I believe we can have the same one as for the, for the register form, we can have the same one as for the login form. Class register form. Yeah, let's add another field to the register form to check that the password is correct, right? So the typical retype your password, something like repeat password is going to be equal to the password field. So something like this, but the name will be different. A repeated password. That's cool. So now let's go ahead and render them, right? So far we only have this single root, so let's create another root that renders the login. So something like app.root, and we want to render that on the /login. And we want to call our function, we want to call it login, for example. So now let's return the render template of login.html instead. So instead of rendering index.html, let's render login.html. So we can start by copying this. Let's rename that to login. That's cool. So here we have login. Let's change the title to something like login. And as for the actual content that we want to show, we'll pass some variables to the template. Which variables? So at least we'll need to pass which form we want to render, right? So the form, let's create it here. So form equals login form. That's cool. And let's pass that as a template, as a variable to the template. So form equals form. There you go. So now on login HTML, we'll have the form variable available, right? So we can start using it with form.whatever. However, Flask Bootstrap provides another utility to render WT forms nicely, right? And to get the errors and to show them, which is very cool. And this one, we can import them from bootstrap/wtf.html. And let's call that WTF when importing it. So, Bootstrap with a P at the end. Cool. So, whenever we are rendering Flask WTF form, we can render that directly with the WTF.form field utility. WTF.form field, to which we'll pass the actual field that we wanna render. In our case, that would be, for example, form, which is the name of the variable that we are injecting the template, .email, for example. So if we load that and we go to /login, it says, oh yeah, it says that a secret key is required to use CSRF. So something that Flask WTF provides is protection against a common attack in the web called cross-request site forgery, which is for sending forms from other sites and gaining access to things that you shouldn't. So in order to use this protection, we need to add a config to our application, which is the secret key. So app.config. We want to set the secret key. Ideally, you should set this to something really secret. The Flask documentation has information on how to get a real secret here. In our case, we will just hardcode something like, this is a secret. Don't do this. Cool. So if we reload now, yeah, our image field is being rendered. Let's keep rendering things. So we'll also need to render the hidden tag from the form, and let's see how that looks like. So form hidden tag. The hidden tag is the actual bit that protects from CSRF. So if we reload now, nothing seems to have changed, but we'll see that there is a CSRF token input being rendered that is hidden. But yeah, the site will check this upon receiving forms to check that the one who sent this form is our actual website and not another website. So we are rendering the email, and let's render the password again. And let's render also an input type submit with value login. That's cool. We have everything set. Something that we're not doing is, yeah, the layout is a bit incorrect, right? Because our fields are not inside a form tag. So we'll need a form. The action will be our login URL. We can get that with the URL form utility from Flask. So URL for, and let's get the URL for the login. As a method, we want to send this via post. That's cool. So now let's add all our fields inside our form. That's great. Cool. So let's also create the register form. So the idea will be very similar. Easter.html. Later on, we'll be able to refactor this and make more sense out of everything. But for now, let's take the easy path. Cool. So we have login. Let's create a register too. Oh man, what's that? Cool. Register form. That's with capital R. That's cool. So now, even if we go to So login loads correctly, register loads correctly, but register is not rendering the what's the name we gave it? Repeat password. Yeah, repeat password is not being rendered there. So we can, in the register.html, we can render that as well. Repeat password. There you go. So if we reload, we have our other field. So now on login, we have these two. That's great. Something that we want to try is that the validation works, right? So in this case, this should give me an error, right? And it's not giving an error to us. So in order to do that, we'll have the help of Flask Bootstrap for that, because it ties with it talks with Flask WTF and creates adds the validation errors as errors in the form. But we need to change some things. So we need to first make our routes receive both methods, both get and post methods. So methods equal get and post. And we want to validate the form when receiving it. In order to do that, we'll do if form validate on submit. This will return a true. If the form is valid, it will return a false otherwise. So if the form is valid, we will just return it's valid. We'll change that later on. But for now, it's valid. That's it. So that's cool. We'll add that to the login form. Let's add that to the register form as well. So both work for us. So cool. And what else? So now our the input should be inside. So that's cool. If we reload, now our web page, the login form, and we try to send that already, we are getting validation errors. That's awesome. And if we go to the register page, we should get them as well. We are not getting them. Let's see what's wrong in the register HTML. Oh, that's what's wrong. So if we reload and cool. So that's login. Let's go to register. I think that's because we copied and pasted this. So this is not the URL for login. This is the URL for register. And I need to change more things. Register and what else? Register. These are the problems of copying and pasting code. Cool. So now when I reload and I register or try to, it says method not allowed. We are not accepting post in our register. Oh, there you go. In our register endpoint. So let's add that with methods equals. I want to accept both get and post. Cool. So if I reload again and try to register, we get the errors. So that was it for this video. In the next parts of the series, we'll see some other things. So now, as the final part of this video, let's commit everything we had. So here we have our process running. We can stop it. And let's see what's the status of this. So we see that we have pip file log, apply, and templates already. So let's git add all of them. And git status. Cool. So let's commit that. So git commit -m first video creating forms. That's cool. So see you in the next parts of the video. In the next one, we are going to learn how to handle database migrations and whatnot.